first challenge that we found, a principle that is required for building a risk framework right from the scratch. We had certain issues pertaining to interpretation of data. The key source itself is the data and interpretation of data. We have had like a beautiful conversation going roundabout from how the data is being consistently being brought in, what are the different scenarios. We took some international payment scenarios where data traveling from across Canada to outside and inwards, taking example of Nepal as a territory, which is completely different from what Canada is and where we are. Moving towards the next big course of item was consistency. Now, consistency is a very good and a very critical aspect of this data because we've been talking about different sources where we consolidate data. And to the previous conversation that we had with the whole group, garbage in, garbage out, I think this is going to be the concept of tonight, that this is the most critical part, right? So if we don't have consistency, that's going to be another most challenging part. And then beyond consistency, the input, right? What can we do better? Because if it's garbage in, that's where the garbage out happens. So what can we do to make our principle of risk better is change at the source, possible change at the source. And one of the key important points that we discussed was, think of a small entity to make a change versus a fintech versus a large bank. It brings a mammoth of a problem versus it's very easy, like fail fast, fail safe. We could just change in a very small organization versus making things so difficult at a large bank where you can't just think of making those changes overnight. By the time the whole prospect is already gone, right? But these are some very, very critical aspects. And the last and the most important thing we spoke about was the regulators' interference or regulators' participation in this. At this point in time, we see the challenge with the country that the regulators' aspect is not very, very proactive. We are thinking of an area where reactive measures are being looked at. We have our own challenges as a country. We are being always looked at as a partner of the elder brother, and that's how we react, and that's how we are built. So that's the design of ourselves. But the aspect of the data and our issues to be taken to the regulators, that is something which is an unsolved problem in just 30 minutes that we tried.
Super. Thank you very much.
All right, Bhavna Kaushal, and I have spent about 20 years, I think, in the financial services industry, done everything from work with the big 5 banks, global networks, scale up fintechs, and now work in an advisory capacity. And I had a very interesting topic and group discussion in terms of our table. The topic we had was AI as a force for resilience and responsible growth. And I thought, and I think most of us thought that was quite fascinating, because one of the first things was, how do you position AI as an enabler of responsible growth and not simply as something for cost control? And I think the first thing that came up when we talked about that is it's going to come in phases. Phase 1, already here, and people are thinking of it very much as cost control. Get the menial tasks, the repetitive tasks taken care of, and that also means that you are going to remove the individuals associated with it. There was some discussion around, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? There does tend to be a much higher churn when you look at people or human resources that are in that particular field doing the repetitive menial work. And the advantage that AI could bring in is that you stop losing the organizational memory that you do in places where you have those high level of churn. But I think that's just step 1. And step 2 then becomes, how do you really use it for responsible growth? And we got into a fair amount of discussion on this one. Some of it simply being, yes, we talked, the data in, data out, garbage data, yes. But the second piece was also that most AI today, the data is per se divided into two phases. One is publicly available information, or the second, the siloed organizational information which sits only within that organization and is not used outside. So we touched on the concept of, a lot of people call it open banking, open finance, or open data eventually, where you're really going to be able to use data from across the ecosystem. And I think that's what actually will eventually remove risk as well as enable growth, because you're not going to see purely public or purely siloed information. It's going to start becoming bigger. Obviously, there's going to be risks associated with that as well as to where is that data being used, how is it being used, and that was the third piece, is how do you get ethics involved and values. And this one was, again, very interesting. All I can say is, I have to give credit to everybody sitting on the table over there, because right away it came to, is this going to be something that's purely rules-based? Because in one way, yes, you can put your organizational values as a rules-based structure, but then the fact of the matter is that when it comes to AI, it's not simply deterministic. It's not a deterministic tool; it's a probabilistic one. So, will it really be able to meet those guidelines as a probabilistic tool when it comes to ethics, when it comes to values, and how do you use things in that way? So I think that's something that was, obviously a question that was left open because we do not know as yet, outside of the fact that yes, it can be rules-based, outside of the fact that, it will still require a lot of work because I think, as the panelists said earlier, you have a situation where somebody specializes in privacy, and that's the person who knows all the rules associated to privacy. Somebody else in terms of, the data rules. How are you going to make sure every single one of those rules actually comes into AI and then is followed? So I think that particular piece we said, what is going to require work, it's going to come, and there'll probably be multiple iterations of it. And then the final question was, what is the role that, people, processes, and technology are going to play? And I think in each of these instances, there's going to be a unique role, right? And we're going to have to see how this comes through. But that really was the end discussion when it came to use of, AI for responsible growth as well as resilience.
Great. Thank you very much, Bhavna.
I think we'll feel very much a marriage in terms of what Bhavna shared, because resilience and is also a responsibility of the compliance function. So the piece that we got in terms of task, and I'll just read it out so everyone's on the same page, it's if compliance could be redesigned as a business enabler instead of a cost center, what would it look like in an AI era? So as my luck would have it, we had some really brilliant minds around there. We got our creative juices flowing, and we talked about why compliance is not a business enabler today, right? And it's because they don't have access to data and they can't make decisions very fast. And also, traditionally, compliance people were very compliance related, so they didn't have that business expertise. And so they were risk averse to making a decision or taking a decision on a product or a particular thing within operations that they was not easily accessible for them to understand. And the other thing, which was the flip side that we got into, is now it's bringing clarity to both sides of the fence, because now the business can understand what are those compliance expectations and the rules and the things that I need to do so that you can go to compliance in those specific incidents versus in the past it's like we shove a note in an inbox and they get back to me when they get back to me. And also the thing with AI that we believe will bring an enabler is around criticality and prioritization, right? Because if you take the natural sense today, I'm sure if you ask Babu, his thing is as important as Bhavna's, right? And she believes hers is more important than him. But when you shove it to compliance without that data and the backing of being able to give you that output in a very heavily traditionally administrative function, it's not as easy to do. So our belief is that that will bring a lot of clarity and simplify and also move things faster in a way. We also had a similar question to Bhavna in terms of prioritization, which I just talked about, and then we talked about people, process, and technology. And for us, that we hovered around really change management. And essentially, before legislation comes into effect, what's the interim models and what would be the things that are acceptable? And we also talked about firms having their own policy, because traditionally the government, and let's call it the policymakers at the Ministry of Finance level, is never really thinking about what legislation they need. So our goal is that AI now will enable us to think smarter, do it faster, and come up with policies that we can now go and lobby and advocate for that will eventually become, let's call it the future of legislation from an AI perspective that allows our sector to take risk-based decisions in a way that doesn't stifle innovation.
Interesting. In fact, balancing innovation with compliance is the most important piece, and everyone tries to juggle around, okay, where to draw the line. And of course, you cannot compromise at any point in time with compliance or risk, but at the same time, you cannot kill the innovation. So how do you find the midway out is something that is a dilemma for most of us. And that is where concepts like sandboxes, interesting such kind of concepts come in. And I'm sure we can all put together and curate some more interesting things. Thank you very much, Shireen, for that wonderful share.
None of us was from the BFSI, but we ran our wild guesses at how it can be. And I'm coming in the background part. I worked for a lot of Fintech companies and the financial institutions. Based on that, we had a discussion. And what I can think of, definitely the GRC can move from reactive to proactive. We can definitely go there, and we thought of how it can be done, right? So there are multiple levels or layers where it can be covered, right? For example, right now it's more like regulators are giving, or the organizations are having their own defined set of policies and all, which needs to be implemented, right? That's the kind of legacy system we are having, right? But definitely with the invention of those generative AI and all the AI models, there's a huge potential that we can have the AI models or AI agents, we per se can call it, right? They can be put into the system, right? And at the various levels, and those can proactively keep on looking at the data patterns which are getting generated for various purposes, right? Or for various personas of users, right? Or various roles, and specifically at the group level, at the persona level, right? Or specific personalized customer level, right? Those can keep on monitoring those kinds of data patterns, right, which are developing, and take the proactive action in order to be compliant and to stop any mishappening, which is right in the legacy system. Right now it is like something happens, then you plug the gap, right? So that could be proactively, those kind of agents can be used and developed, which can basically provide those kind of things we can see. Now in terms of the ROI, I think right now it's very difficult to say in that context that what could be the ROI on that, but looking at the risk factor and the benefit of it, definitely it looks like it would be a good to have thing down the line, right? The more risk over here is to develop the right kind of agent for that purpose. That is the bigger risk rather than having it, right? So I think that requires, as you said, maybe we need to have some sandboxes or something where we can basically look at how to make sure those agents good enough to productionize, right? So that we can basically rely on those and basically have those kind of systems in place, right? It would be like down the line, I can futuristic views like we would be having an orchestration layer of agents, right? Where any executive or any employee, depending upon what kind of role they are performing or what kind of persona is defined for them, they can look into all those kind of things and patterns, and they can take, if required, they can take the necessary actions into the system directly, right? Rather than depending on going through all the current hierarchies and all those. So I think those are the discussions we did, I think, Babu.
Super. Interesting points you spoke about. And of course, you know, it is not just a question of developing an agentic AI, but also governing them.
Correct.
Okay, you cannot leave the decisions made by agentic AI to be taken directly. You definitely need a human hand or a human brain to work on top of it. So it is basically like you need to go from Toronto to Vancouver. Either you can go by walk, or you need to take a plane, or you need to take a next level of transport. So the more the better efficient method of transport, the more faster you will reach the destination. So So AI in itself is not a destination, but it is just a means to reach the destination.
It's a more of an enabler, right? And how
Absolutely.
fast you can reach the destination. That's how it is.
Correct. So we have been learning a lot from these markets, and agentic AI that way has been coming out, proving to be a very interesting innovation in most of these things. But again, getting the right kind of framework in AI is more important, because the kind of illusions it creates, the kind of false information that also comes along with AI, depending upon the data which is fed in, is equally detrimental to the growth of the organization. So it may probably take organizations back instead of taking it forward. So great conversations by all of you, and I think each one of you has been participative, and that is the objective of this entire activity of curated learning. It is not a single intelligence of a single person, but of the entire group as a whole, and together we will learn and build this High to AI as a community. In the future, we see a lot of interesting contributions from each one of you coming in to either creating an industry report, or in creating a policy together, or creating a framework for the policy for the regulators. Thank you very much.